I wouldn't say that I'm at a conclusion because
Okay.
I'm still open to say right now that I will leave Islam.
Okay.
I
That's
will
good.
openly say that right now. I'm
This is the best conversation with a Muslim that I have ever had, as I appreciate
hey.
saying it.
Guys, it's been a conversation I've been looking forward to. Apostate Prophet versus Khalil Allah. Um, the way this will be structured is Khalil will start off first, giving kind of his reasons for becoming a Muslim, and then Apostate will interact. Then, after a half an hour, we'll kick it over, and then Apostate will give his reasons for leaving Islam, and Khalil will interact. And then, after that time, we're going to give a good like 15 minutes, hopefully 20, maybe tops, to answer some questions from you guys in the chat. So, ask a question, tag James is tired, and then we'll go from there. And then at the very end, we'll also plug what you guys are doing now. Uh, Thank you two guys for joining me.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I do want to say real quick before I get started, the chat is very lively right now for James' channel, and I want to make sure that anybody that has come over from not my channel or any brothers and sisters out there, make sure we stay respectful in the chat. These discussions can get contentious, but as you guys know me, even from an atheist, I was always one to be respectful, try to be charitable to the other person's position, even though you disagree with it. So let's try to make sure we're as charitable and respectful in the chat as possible. And I'm speaking to my atheist buddies out there too, because I'm already seeing Daz is at work in the chat. So Daz, chill out.
I would also like to add, I completely agree with that. I think the purpose here should be to understand each other, to seek and find the truth. Each of us can change their minds. We're not here to humiliate and to attack each other. So I would also just ask and request everyone to be just nice and good and understanding. And thanks, everybody.
Alhamdulillah. All right, so I will start off. Basically, we're gonna give. I'll give take 5-10 minutes to give one AP over here the ability to hear my testimony, and anybody that's in the chat that has not heard it before. So I'll start off by saying that I was born Catholic. I was born and raised Catholic. Was baptized, confession. Gone through the whole works. I've done confession, taken communion, confirmation, the whole works. When I was in second grade, I was told by my science teacher that if I didn't turn in my homework on time, that I was going to be hung by my tongue over fire and brimstone. For a second grader, that scared the living hell out of me. So eventually, after that happened a few different times, my mom ended up pulling me out of school and putting me in out of the private Catholic school that I was at and put me in a public school, to where I grew up in a Christian church, a little bit more laid back. Joined the youth group, was part of the youth group for a while. Started to get more involved with the youth group, more as like a leader of some sorts. When I was starting to get older, was told that I was filled with the Holy Spirit, and that I needed to go become a preacher. When I went to go become a preacher, well, I didn't go yet. I was preparing to do it. I was a few months out of thinking about going to seminary, and before I did that, I wanted to dive into the Bible and get a really good understanding, maybe be a couple steps ahead of some of the other people, some of my peers that I might be in seminary with. When I did that, I read some stories about bears coming out and mauling children to death. I read some stories about, God making a deal with a father that the first thing that walks through his door he'd sacrifice. The all-knowing God ended up knowing that it was going to be his daughter that walked through the door, and they ended up going through with the deal and killed his daughter. All these other different stories that were in the Bible, and this was like, to me, this was new news. I have not heard these stories at the pulpit before. So it, once again, scared the living daylights out of me, saying, hey, this isn't my God. This isn't the God that I believe in. So I ended up stepping away from Christianity at that point, and considering myself an agnostic, not knowing if God existed or not. I do admit that my leaving of the Christian faith was of an emotional and moral issues that I had, and I do not believe that leaving a God belief, you can leave a system of belief, but to become a non-believer and say that God doesn't exist because of emotional reasons, I would say I wouldn't actually agree with that. So I think that I left Christianity for bad reasons. Though becoming an atheist, I studied more and more when it comes to philosophy, logic, reason, dove into science, started reading, books about astrophysics, started reading books about biology and things like that, about the natural world that we observe, and started to build logical arguments against the existence of God. So eventually went from an agnostic atheist to a hard atheist, making the positive claim that it's impossible for gods to exist, using things like the problem of evil, using things like the omniscience paradox to make the claim that God does not exist. Through this time, I ended up making a YouTube channel called The Empathetic Atheist. So I would have people on talking about what they believe, why they believe it, and always being open-minded to changing my position if that was the case. If it ended up convincing me, because we cannot choose what we're convinced of. So what I did, I ended up getting in touch with a Facebook group that I was in. We'd get on the calls. James actually, he was on the calls with me for what, about maybe 2 years now. We've been doing it, where we have all kinds of people with all kinds of belief come into these Facebook groups, and we discuss what we believe and why. So through that, I met some Muslim philosophers, some people that wouldn't call themselves academics, but I believe that they're very, very intelligent people. Actually, AP just recently interacted with these guys. They would be the guys, Brother Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, Abdul Rahman, Brother Sharif, Hatem, Hanif, all these guys. There was about 7 of them that came in. They just started obliterating people's worldviews, tearing Christianity apart. In my opinion, tearing other, Hinduism, all kinds of belief systems, including atheism. So I was the atheist that was going to bring these guys down a few pegs. I was going to go really do some studying on Islam, prove them wrong, and show them that Islam is not correct, just to keep them in their lane. So through my studies and through my refutations, it was about a year's worth of time, around 8 months. I would say between 8 and 10 months, that we talked to each other. And me trying to bring new things every single day to try and refute their position. I found that there was always an answer. There was always something that could solve the problem. So there was and these things were more of a philosophical issue. So through these things, at the end of the day, I ended up, putting a kufi on and saying my shahada at the very end, becoming a Muslim, alhamdulillah. So the route that I went to get through this discussion I had with these Muslims, these Muslim brothers of mine now, it started off dealing with like epistemology. Started dealing with, can we hold reasonable beliefs without empirical evidence? So we looked at like the laws of logic, looking at identity, saying, hey, this is something that's called a presupposition. There is no empirical evidence for it. You must assume it. You must assume it at the very beginning to even reason or observe anything in a reality. So I was fine with that. Then we went into what's called the Kalam cosmological argument. After studying epistemology, it seemed like it came with a different light, and I think it was articulated differently than I normally would have heard. So basically everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. That is it. Me, as a very recent atheist, would see the William Lane Craig version and deny the William Lane Craig version of the Kalam, because he puts this thing at the very end, and we call this thing God. That's jumping to conclusions. We shouldn't even be close to even saying the word God right now. So after that, you go into the contingency argument, which AP, you just recently talked to the brothers about. So very well the articulation that I would make if I was in direct line with them and how they would reason for the contingency argument. You kind of know that argument already. So after the contingency argument, and we can go into all this in detail if you'd like, because this is the path towards my belief in Allah. So after that, we look at the argument for intelligence, an argument for will, free will, for God having free will, and then sustainability. And then after that, I used a process of elimination to use the classical laws of logic and looking at things to see if they're coherent or incoherent, and taking worldviews that have direct contradictions and putting them to the side, basically throwing them out the window if they're not resolvable. So at the end of the day, I saw, and I could be wrong, I saw with what I would consider fallible knowledge, that right now, although I don't know everything about Islam and I'm still studying it, that right now the most current reasonable position for me would be to hold Islam until otherwise shown. So that's why I'm sitting here going to have a discussion with AP about if that process that I came to from having these discussions with the Muslims all the way up until I was convinced, if that process was reasonable. I think that was close to 10 minutes, and you're free to. You're muted, AP.
Is that what we're doing? 10 minutes? I'm sorry if I missed that part, but
Yeah, we're just doing like a 5 to 10 minute, testimony on
okay.
that's how I came to it, and then once we're done speaking about me and we go to the next 30 minutes, then you can give your testimony on how you left.
Okay. So I made a few notes while you were talking about your experience with Christianity, the revelations that you had about the Christian belief in Scripture, how you left it. You admit it very well. I appreciate that leaving Christianity was more due to a moral or emotional matter, which I cannot judge or blame. I just have one question about that before I move on.
Sure.
Could Christianity still be true despite your moral disagreements and your disgust with specific things within Christianity?
Yes. So the reason why I deny Christianity now is not based on a moral issue. It's based on logical issues. So I have issues with the Trinity. There's something called the logical problem of the Trinity. There's a logical problem of the incarnation, and that actually trickles over to issues with the atonement also. So the three key tenets of Christianity show to be problematic for me. And for me to open the door of entertaining Christianity again, those would need to be resolved.
I understand. When it comes to Islam, if you are convinced that Islam is true, logically seen, if the theology of it and the explanation of the world and of causality and all that makes sense to you, but nevertheless you still come to the conclusion that certain elements within Islam are disgusting or morally disturbing to you, would that be a problem, or would you simply explain them away because you know that Islam is true?
Because I have come to the belief from a philosophical lens rather than reading the Quran and, having some type of personal experience or having some emotional feeling towards Islam or towards the Quran. Like I said, I left emotions out of it completely and just dealt with it logically as to not make the same mistake as I did with Christianity. So with studying that or with getting into that, there are, as of right now, things that I am battling with when it comes to my subjective opinion on certain things, knowing that these things are considered sins, knowing these things are haram, but me not having the understanding of exactly why, and me as a human being having the questions, why are these things wrong? So yes, I have things that are possibly, in my mind, I don't really understand why they're wrong, but then again, Allah knows best. It says it about 1 million times in the Quran.
Yeah. I'm so tempted right now to go into certain moral arguments and Islamic laws to address that, but I feel like it would just derail from a very important topic that we're dealing with. But
we can definitely set that up for a future episode.
Sure, that could happen. Yeah. So one issue that I have is what I see from how you have explained your journey through out of Christianity through different religions and atheism into Islam. What I see is that you went through an elimination process, but I don't exactly see how you arrived at Islam. I mean, you said it. Other things didn't make sense. Islam had a better explanation, but how exactly did you come to the conclusion that Islam must be true? What was it about Islam itself that made you convert to Islam?
Sure. So I wouldn't say that I'm at a conclusion because I'm still open to say right now that I will leave Islam.
Okay,
I will openly say that right now. I'm ready to leave Islam once the falsification process has been somebody has succeeded with that. To where one falsification process is if the Quran is the speak and breathed word of Allah, there should not be any contradictions within that book through an internal critique. If somebody brings me something that is an apparent contradiction that cannot be resolved, well, then I will go ahead and put the Quran to the side and leave Islam. Because to be consistent, that's what I did with any other worldview that I pushed to the side, was because it had a direct contradiction through an internal critique.
And what is it that brought you to Islam? What is it about that made you
So,
convert to
so
Islam?
the positives for Islam, other than just stating that this is the one worldview that I'm not seeing having any type of contradictions or being completely incoherent in my mind, that's one reason. But that is a very low bar to set. That does not mean that it's true. Just because it doesn't contradict doesn't mean that it's true. Right now, I could say that I could have no kids and no wife, and there's nothing contradictory about that. But I do. I have a kid. I have 5 kids and a wife. So even though I could give you something that's not contradictory, that doesn't mean that it's true. Mm-hmm. So there has to be something that draws to me through the belief system, like a positive, like positive attributes of Islam that would draw to me as saying that it is most likely the case that is true. And one of those very, very important things is one of the first surahs that I learned. And it goes, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. Which obviously, AP, you know what that means. And for anybody that's in the chat that doesn't, it says, say in the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful, say he is one. He is the eternal refuge and self-sufficient. He is not beget, nor is he born. And there is nothing in existence like Allah. So when going through things like the kalam and the contingency argument, speaking about a necessary being, by definition, a necessary being is something that is self-sufficient, something that doesn't need anything else for its existence, no dependencies whatsoever. It seems as if Surah Ikhlas specifically speaks of Allah with those definitions, like almost to the T, like literally to the words of the definitions of what a necessary being is in a philosophical manner.
Can I ask 2 questions about this? One question is, could you accept the possibility or imagine the possibility that no religion out there is true?
Yeah.
I mean, it's entirely acceptable, right? That no religion gives a satisfying answer to the issues at hand.
Yep.
And the other question is, if Islam in one way seems to make sense, but in other ways, maybe even in less relevant ways, it has very obvious flaws that cannot be overlooked. Mm-hmm. Then you could still conclude that Islam is false, right? I think you have answered this question already because you said,
I'm open to changing my mind because of that. Yes,
I understand. That is a good approach. Many times, what I see is that people simply go for one thing that makes sense within the religion, while closing their eyes to everything, every possible flaw around it. So I really appreciate that.
I still try to hold my atheistic, my mindset as an atheist being consistent with my standards of evidence.
I understand. Have you made yourself familiar with, did you read the Quran through entirely, or did you
I have not read it entirely through, no.
Not entirely, okay. No. Have you made yourself familiar with certain issues like the scientific claims about the Quran and their conflict with the scientific world?
Yes.
Is that something that you're still battling with? Or?
It is something that I'm still, a few of them I'm looking into. Like one recently that I'm looking into is something that had to do with it's called like an inheritance issue. When it comes to, it's in Surah 4. You probably know what I'm talking about. So I'm looking into that current one right now. Like I said, I'm open to hearing people bring me, hey, this is a contradiction in the Quran. Go ahead and look at it. So I take some time. I really show some effort to look into it, and then either accept or deny it. But like I said, I'm trying to be as open-minded as possible.
I'm smiling because the inheritance issue in the Quran is actually something that I don't really, I don't think about it very much. Other people think it's a very big problem. To me, I'm like, I don't see what you guys see in that. I have issues with how the Quran describes the sun and the moon, for example, or the stars in the sky, or the sky, or how the earth came into existence. I mean, to me, it looks like the Quran has makes references to very old creation myths that are not very much reconcilable with the truths that we nowadays know about the natural world around us. But it's nice that you said you would be open to going further into those things and eventually changing your mind. One issue that I have is, so you say that you are that Islam has a good explanation for you when it comes to theology, the nature of being, and so on. What Islam basically does is it makes a claim that there is a God and there is only one God, and that God created everything. With that God, everything began. And you can very well combine that with certain ideas about, with certain cosmological arguments, especially. But is that really sufficient to convert to a religion? I mean, any idea out there could make similar claims. I went into Taoism, for example, which explains the world which explains that there is a balance in the world that is impossible to define by the average human, which keeps the world in balance, which everything comes from. Buddhism has this idea of dependent, dependent origin or something like that. So different philosophical and religious ideas have different interpretations of there being a causality, of there being a causer, a mover, or an unmoved mover. So this is only one certain aspect within Islam, but Islam also expects certain other things from you, such as that you accept the historicity of the Kaaba and of the Quran and of Muhammad, that he spoke the absolute truth. Like, have you ever confronted the issue of why you would trust Muhammad? What makes you trust Muhammad? Because he is a key figure next to Allah when it comes to Islam. Have you made yourself familiar with that?
Yes. So I haven't yet gone to college for it, but I do know that there is, like, when it comes to like hadith, like the words that came out of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mouth. We have this hadith science that in this chain of narration that seems to be testable. So, like I said, I'm 5 months into Islam, so I'm reading books on the basics. I'm going to classes, on over Skype, over video, brand new Muslim classes. So I'm learning the basics right now while arguing the more intricate philosophical levels of more of a general type of theism.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. One issue that I still have is I'm not trying to be.
This is what this is for. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand why Islam.
Okay, so like I said, like you said, that the whole Surah Ikhlas, there are other religions that could possibly talk about this necessary being. So that means that Islam is not the only one that makes these claims.
Okay.
So there's other religions. Now, obviously, polytheistic religions would be out of the question because there is a necessary being, and necessary being by definition is self-sufficient, and there is only one. So that would kind of bring this down to like monotheistic religions, or religions with like a creator that could be self-sufficient, but there are like demigods that do their own little jobs. So when it comes to those, like I said, after I got to the general God, after I got through the Kalam, basically the definition of God is these philosophical arguments that were all piled up to bring me to general theism, stating that there is a causal principle that's a necessary and sufficient conditions for the rest of existence to even be here, and that necessary being is an intelligent agency that used its free will to create the universe, or create whatever exists and now is sustaining the universe. All those arguments put together get you to that definition of God. And then you look at the claims that line up with that definition of God, and you do internal critiques to see where contradictions are. Looking into these others, like, for example, the Trinity, when it comes to Christianity, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit are all God, yet they're not each other. And if the claim is that the Father is identical to God, same with the Son and the Holy Spirit, it seems as if it violates the law of identity. Bam, contradiction, move it to the side. Let's go to the next one. And I just did that over and over again, looking for internal contradictions, then attempting to talk to people who believed in those, or look at refutations or counter arguments to try and see if these things can be resolved. At the end of the day, Islam was the one that I didn't have any logical issues with. Everything that I seem to have researched was resolved, and that's why I believe that although I hold fallible knowledge and I could be wrong, and I'm opening to changing my mind, I believe that through my mindset, I have reasonably come to this belief and could reasonably leave this belief.
Of course, I take a little bit of an issue with your presupposition in this matter of accepting cosmological arguments, such as the contingency argument or the Kalam cosmological argument, as true, whereupon you then, or specific forms of it even as true, whereupon you then accept Islam as the best explanation, together combined with those arguments. I would entirely contest the validity of the Kalam cosmological argument or even the contingency argument. The issue is if we went into that, we would completely go into
that's fine. I do just want to add that my renditions of the arguments that I make when it comes to the Kalam, I do not make knowledge claims in any of this.
Okay,
when somebody says the universe began to exist, they're like, well, we don't know. I say, I absolutely agree with you. We don't know. Yeah, exactly. Is it reasonable to believe? Like, did this microphone right here as a completed object, even though matter and energy could have existed eternally, the completed object right here, this conceptual object, did it begin to exist at some time? Sure. Okay. Did it have a cause? Can we use inductive reasoning to say that everything that we see beginning to exist has an explanation for its existence? Okay. Then it seems reasonable that premise one is true. We could be wrong, but through inductive reasoning and the information that we have, it seems reasonable.
Yeah, even when it comes to the Big Bang, it's like we have certain information, certain ideas that make us think that the Big Bang is the best explanation to how the universe came to the level that it is right now. It was at a certain point expanded, became hotter or colder, and so on. We have these pieces of evidence that we piece together and come to the accepted theory that there is a Big Bang which happened, but we are not entirely sure about that, and we are not entirely, fully, 100% convinced that the universe actually has a beginning, which is why it is hard to argue that these arguments are necessarily true. I love that attitude. I really love that attitude because that's how I think. I think I approach it with skepticism. If there is only a tiny little bit of chance that our convictions are not entirely true, then how could I possibly accept a certain religion is absolutely true? Is how I think. But before we run out of time with you, so I don't know if you want to quickly go through with me on this, but according to the Islamic idea, Allah was in the beginning. Allah was the most perfect being. He then created human beings. Do you know that according to the Islamic teachings, he only created human beings so they worship him and for no other purpose? That is the Islamic explanation. Okay. He created these beings perfectly with all their details. Everything within creation is entirely his determination and his creation. The Islamic teaching is that Allah predetermined everything before he created it. And according to the Quran, the Islamic teaching is also that Allah himself guides whom he wills and leads astray whom he wills. And those whom he guides will go to heaven where they will be happy and worship him forever. And those who are misguided will go to hell where they will burn and suffer forever. And the Quran even explicitly says that we have created many of the humans and the jinn for hell. What I would propose here is, do you agree that it is problematic that Allah in the very beginning creates myriads of beings, of humans in his perfect eternal state, creates flawed beings like myself for the sole purpose that we worship him? He creates me, my personality, my biological nature, my lifeline, and everything that I have. He then expects me to believe in him and to worship him. I fail to do that. I think about worshiping him, but I come to the conclusion that I simply cannot believe that this is true. And as a result of that failure, he burns me in hell. And that is apparently my fault. But we have also learned within this premise that Allah, in the very beginning, created me with all my details and my personality and decreed everything that will happen. Everything is his creation. So even if I decide not to believe in him, that was also his decree in the very beginning. Is that do you resolve this problem? Or
that used to be a huge problem. Yes. So I do resolve it. So so most of the time we believe, and I would say most Christians would posit that God's knowledge is necessary, that he knows everything. I would state that God has three different criteria of knowledge. One is necessary knowledge about his own attributes, his omni properties, the things that he has to know about himself necessarily. he has something else called free knowledge. Free knowledge is the ability, it's contingent knowledge that could be different. It could be otherwise. And that free knowledge is knowledge that has to do with he chose the universe by which has green grass and not purple grass. The universe we live in could have had purple grass, and it wouldn't be a contradiction. It would just be a universe with a different color grass. He could have chose a universe where I have one less hair on my head than I do right now. There's nothing contradictory about that. That's contingent knowledge that could have been a different way. I feel like as if when he created us with free will. So there's contingent knowledge that he would know that we are going to go down a certain path because we have freely chosen to go down that path. And it is contingent in the sense that it could have been otherwise. And then he also has middle knowledge. So the decisions that we didn't make, he would know what my life would be like if I lived in New York and didn't get married and have 5 kids. He would know what my life would be like in that sense. So all of that would be under an umbrella of contingent knowledge rather than necessary knowledge. So at that point in time, I could still say that he gives me the ability to make my choices. Therefore, I'm responsible for what I do.
Okay, but my issue with that is if he has foreknowledge of everything, and if he decrees everything, and if at some point I have the option to go against my ultimate purpose and to make a choice for which I will be held accountable and punished, doesn't that mean that I have made a decision that is not part of his decree, although Allah decrees everything in the beginning?
Okay, so ask that one more time.
Sorry. If Allah decrees everything according to Islam, but I, in my lifetime, at some point, make a choice that is purely my free will, which is why I will be held responsible and punished. Doesn't that mean that my free will is outside of his decree and his creation because it is my free will? Doesn't that mean that Allah did not create and decree everything?
Yes. So when it comes to the word decree, I see decree more like judicial system decrees that we stop at stop signs. We can freely choose to not follow that decree, but what most of us do anyways, because, well, let's face it, we don't want to pay the cop the ticket for running the stop sign. Some of us, hold to some type of well-being toward society is better if we follow the rules that have been put in place by our system. So when it comes to decree, I don't see decree as being something that's really causative, that's like dependent, or not dependent, but like a decree means that there's not any sense of like freedom of choice or anything like that. I think that there was rules and a structure put in place that we were given the ability to go against.
But the Quran says that Allah, if He did want us to believe, we would believe. But He guides and misguides whom He wills. He decides what we will eventually do and where we will eventually go. So if He could, if it is the case that if He wanted me to believe, I would believe, doesn't that mean that my eventual abode very much depends on whether He wants me to go to heaven or not?
Well, that all depends on how He does it, which I'm not God, so I wouldn't be able to explain to you exactly what He would do. But I would see as if I am a human being and He knows that I'm freely going to choose to reject Him or to start to move away from Him. He can decree I'm going to give Him what He wants.
My
or if I want
guys,
to come closer. What's up?
I'm just going to jump in to tell you that's been a half an hour. So
oh, come on, it was so good.
It's getting good. If you want, you can maybe make your reasons for Islam really small, and then you can get back to it, or you can give a lot for your chunk. It's up to you guys. Once again, I apologize if I killed the live chat. Newbie at editing videos, and I may have clicked the kids button, which gets rid of the live, and I fixed it now, so you can actually comment. Feel free to ask any questions. Also, yeah, my bad. Also, click the like and subscribe button if you're interested in seeing more of my damaged content. I have Matt Dillahunty debating the resurrection. Not really a debate, but a conversation with Caleb later. Arn Raw will be on tomorrow. Thank you guys for even just watching the video now. And I'm going to be quiet and let AP go.
Okay. Well, I really loved what we were just talking about, so I really feel bad going away from that.
It's fine. It's fine. We'll do another episode. It's been a fantastic conversation so far.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. Well, okay, let's come to why I left Islam then. So my issue, I've explained this many times before. I was born into a Muslim family, a Turkish Muslim family in Germany. My family was extremely religious by their desire, as they wanted it. I would also be raised as a very religious individual with highly Islamic morals. For a very long time during my life, I did not really want to follow their Islamic upbringing properly, but the whole time during my upbringing, I also very much respected my beliefs and my responsibilities, even when I didn't fully follow them. It was only at a certain point when I was 2010 or something like that, that I decided to fully devote myself to becoming religious and letting go of certain political ideologies and ideas that I held at the time. I did become very religious. I devoted myself fully to it. I made some very radical moves that I nowadays regret. Please don't do things like that, which is getting rid of all my memories of all photographs and everything that I had in the past, which I now considered immoral and corrupt. Fully started praying, observing all my Islamic obligations, studying, reading different books from scholars, especially Ghazali, day and night, reading the Quran several times. And I did read it one time, and during that reading, it was that my father actually came in and said, maybe you should read the Quran with somebody else, because reading such an important text by yourself can raise problems and this and that, because I asked something about the shaitan in the Quran. I didn't really bother too much about that, but there were a lot of things within the Quran that bothered me, especially when it comes to the Quran's remarks, scientific claims, which I so far simply could not accept as true. I mean, as I saw it, as I had internalized it, the things that I learned in the Quran were in contradiction with what I know about the natural world around us. But I tried to suppress that as much as possible, trying to stay devout, trying to tell myself that I'm just a stupid human. I don't know. It's just, I should leave these things to more enlightened minds and to Allah. I tried to pray, tried to look for answers. I was biased toward finding proper answers to these things. I took a break from reading the Quran, practiced Islam further, tried to preach it to others, tried to explain to others why it's so great and all that. I tried to read the Quran again a second time. And as I was reading it, the problems that I first encountered for the first time actually became larger, because I had not in the meantime resolved those problems well enough. I couldn't really I couldn't find satisfaction in the answers that Muslim apologists and scholars provided. So reading the Quran again, I saw new problems that I didn't see before, especially regarding the natural world around us. Things like Allah intervening in Muhammad's life and telling his guests to not sit in his house for too long. And I thought, why is this here in this book, which has no purpose for us at all? And isn't the Quran supposed to be eternal? Why is Allah making such a strange statement here in the Quran? And it was during my third reading of the Quran. I was in the military. Everything, admittedly, those were tough times. I was very depressed, very disappointed with humanity and with how everything was going. I found much more time to think about my beliefs and my ideas and to read the Quran one more time. And as I was reading it, the same things bothered me so much, and I went into finding answers which I could not find. And the doubts became stronger and stronger. I tried to respond to doubts by finding answers, accepting scholarly answers, and fasting and praying and simply trying to shut myself up, but it didn't work. Eventually, the one thing that I was left with, I'm being very quick with this right now, there's so much detail to it, it's hard to describe.
I understand.
But the one thing that was preventing me from being honest to myself about my doubts and my beliefs was that obviously I was very afraid of what the Quran says about doubting and leaving and being punished in hell and all that. But one major issue was the whole issue of predestination, free will, afterlife, and all that. I thought it is a very complex matter that Allah has created us, that he has put us on this earth, that he's testing us. Testing means that I'm confronted with a test that I myself may find very hard to solve. But what I need to do is to hold on to the truth and to pursue it and not to listen to my desires and my doubts and all that. But that opened a new door. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, if Allah created me as a flawed human being, and if he gave me a mind that is capable to figure things out and to think, if he created me flawed, then can I really be punished? Can I really be blamed for thinking further, for trying to find answers, for confronting these questions, for for rationalizing and doubting, going ahead with my doubts? Allah, if he's all knowing and if he's the great God, will know that I have done my best to find the truth. If he created me flawed, he will, I believe, see that I had only good intentions and I was only after the truth. It is hard to believe that he will eventually punish me like an evil person for my terribly false conclusions, especially since my nature is flawed. And once I opened that door, I started going through with all my doubts and quickly noticed that I was just trying to put up barriers which prevented me from leaving Islam. Eventually, it took about a year or so that I concluded that the Quran's description of the sun corresponds with old thoughts of how the sun functions. The Quran's description of Allah being over the waters and creating everything on the waters. The Quran's description of Allah holding up the sky and all these things were all old understandings, old creation myths of the world around us. And these conclusions eventually led me to the conclusion that I cannot accept the Quran as a completely authoritative, correct book. That together brought me also to the whole conflict between predetermination and free will. And as you have said earlier, if there is only one flaw in the Quran, which is supposed to be the absolute direct word of Allah, then that necessarily concludes that Islam is entirely false. This is a very short summary, but that's basically what happened, I would say. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I totally understand. My summary that I gave you in the very beginning was crunching about 8 months to a year. Well, not even crunching my whole entire life. Mainly that last 8 months before I became a Muslim. There's a lot of nuances that go with these, and I totally understand. So, so my first thing would be is that I listened to you and listened to your summary here, and I also watched some of your videos about 3 years ago. You made a couple of videos why I left Islam. I wanted to learn a little bit more about you before coming into here. Just when having these discussions, we need to prepare ourselves the best way possible, gain as much information, get to know the other person as best as we can before we enter a live platform to where we're going to be speaking in front of right now 197 people. So what my first question would be was, it seems as if like through your deconstruction, as your faith slowly started to dwindle away, and then you put these walls up, and like it seemed as if there was like some type of like faith, a fake faith structure that was like, it was like a veil put over your face, like I'm done denying this stuff, but you really weren't. And I can see that because I went through the same thing when it comes to Christianity. Mm-hmm. Are your main contentions, if the Quran is not claimed to be a science book, but claimed to be a book for just basic primitive understanding, and in stating that it's not a science book, would you say that most of your reasons for it would be moral issues that you have with either Sharia or the way that you were raised? Because you brought up a few things about you being like tortured because you weren't convinced, you didn't receive, and then you're going to be punished for that. See, the way that I've been brought to the belief in Islam, and like I said, we can have a further conversation if you want to try and dispel these beliefs that I have. But the way that I see it, a kafir, like a true kafir, is not just anybody who's not a Muslim. It's somebody like Pharaoh who knew that Allah existed, like had the truth of Allah, and still rejected Allah with that belief. If you are not convinced, and you alluded to in the beginning that that you were doing this because, you were born into it. Your parents told you to do it. You weren't like super duper serious about it. And then once you started to have doubts, you tried to get serious about it, but it kind of just fell through. So you wouldn't, in my mind, you wouldn't be punished. Allah would show mercy upon you because you weren't given dawah properly. You weren't given what needs to actually set you straight in the path, so you hold tight to the rope of Allah.
Okay. Well, let me respond to these several points. One is when it comes to the Quran being a book that conveys scientific facts. I think no matter how you see it, even if you say that the Quran is not a book of science or the Quran is not meant to make scientific claims, in reality, what we see is that the Quran does make scientific claims. It makes very big scientific claims. In fact, it refers to itself after making these scientific claims in many places and says, do they not see how we have raised the sky and how we have submitted how we have placed the sun into submission and this and that. So it uses these arguments over and over throughout the book as a kind of as supporting evidence that this does indeed come from the Almighty Creator who created everything. If the Quran was not making any scientific claims, then there wouldn't be any point in bringing these things up. So when it does make these claims, and especially when these claims are made with the pretense that they support the idea that this is from Allah, then we should look at them and should fact check them and see whether they are right or not. So in that regard, the Quran definitely makes scientific claims which we must verify. When it comes to the issue of doubting and being afraid of hell, I only mentioned that because the Quran, talks a lot about what will be done to the disbelievers and how Allah will punish them. And it very graphically describes that Allah will let their skin burn and give them new skin so they can feel the pain and so on. And the idea then, which as Muslims we generally learn, is that if we disbelieve, if we do not believe in Allah and Islam, then we will go to hell. We are kafir, or we are apostates, and we will go to hell. Now, the traditionalist position within, when you look at that, at who is punished, is that people who hear about Islam and who are preached about Islam and who then knowingly, willingly reject it and say, I don't take this, I disbelieve in it. Those people are kafir. If I, as a Muslim, know about this religion and I leave it, then I'm an apostate, a murtad, and a kafir. So the traditional perspective, also shown within the Quran, is not that an individual must for certain know that Islam is absolutely true and must for certain know that Allah is definitely real, and then still reject it and say, yeah, I know Islam is true, but I just don't believe in it. Then he is a kafir and then he will be burned. That position is not an orthodox position. It's not represented within Islamic scripture, and Muslims don't preach that. What they mean is that you are given a preaching of Islam, you reject it while knowing what it preaches, and thereby you are a kafir who is punished. So on that account, I would be punished simply because I did not believe in something, simply because I wasn't convinced.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you believe that the only way for Islam to be true is if it's held through the Orthodox account?
No, I think the only way for Islam to be true is if it's entirely consistent with the Quran's own teachings and with the hadiths.
I just asked because you said a second ago that's not what the Orthodox position is, and I would say that I would be considered a Assalam Abdul.
Thanks, Abdul.
I would not consider just Orthodox or no. I hold to many different minority positions when it comes to Islam, when it comes to the age of Aisha, when it comes to God existing in or outside of time, things like that, very unorthodox views. So I don't see like how an unorthodox view that can be seen like from my reading of the Quran. Like I said, I'm somewhere in Surah 40 something right now. So I'm reading through. I've memorized and been able to recite about 4 or 5 different surahs now. Just for the ability to pray and for the ability I need to do what I do as a brand new Muslim and do it as best as I can. But through the reading of the Quran, I have seen a certain chapter that specifically speaks about what I would see as atheists. Some of them that would speak about like the cow, like Surah Bakara, that talks a lot about kafir. It talks a lot about like unbelievers. When it comes to the sense that from what I'm reading is that those who do not who know that Allah exists but yet still reject him, and then the other ones that don't believe in him because they are unsure or they have not been given their their due diligence of dawah to be able to get them to that conviction that Allah exists, that there will be mercy shown upon them. So I don't see exactly how it necessitates that if you're not Muslim, you're pretty much screwed. I see as even Muslims, Allah tips the scales when it comes to salvation. So we're judged upon our deed, which makes sense to me as an atheist. It's a lot better than accepting a representative through Christianity. It makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more reasonable to believe. Plus, Allah shows his mercy on whom he will. So I could spend a finite amount of time in hell for things I've done after stating my shahada. So I don't see how your view is necessary within the reading of the Quran.
Well, when I said that such a view is unorthodox or not in agreement with the traditionalist position, I might have worded that in a bad way, especially when I said traditionalist. What I meant is that it is not in alignment with how Islam is generally viewed, how it is viewed in the original Orthodox way, which I said because the position that only those who absolutely cognitively know that Islam is true and only those will be punished. This is a position that is not. I can't think of any significant theological creed within Islam that really accepts such a position. The Quran itself says in many places that those who do not believe in Allah, no matter what you do, they would not believe, and Allah will punish them in the hereafter. One very specific issue is about Christians, for example, in the 5th chapter, about around 573, 75 or so, I don't know. In there, it talks about how in the 70s, around those. It talks about the Christian belief in Jesus as God and as the Son of God. And it then says that those who believe in Jesus as the Son, or those who believe in Jesus as also Allah, have disbelieved, and Allah will punish them, and their eternal abode will be hell. They will stay there forever. That's what it says, for example.
Yep,
so
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, what it says is not that they know that this is false and they still insist on something terrible, which is why Allah will punish them. What it says is this is what they believe, this is what they say, and Allah will punish them for their disbelief, for their kufr. So kufr is generally understood within the context of the Quran in many places as people who, as disbelief because you simply do not believe in it. In all honesty, just to conclude this thought, in all honesty, I don't think it makes sense. I mean, I don't think there is a big chunk of people in the world who know that Islam is true and who still reject it. That would be a very strange mindset. But I think the Islamic scripture generally agrees that I, for example, am clearly a kafir who will go to hell if I die in my current state.
Okay. So yeah, I'm reading this one right here, and it says they have certainly disbelieved who say Allah is the third of three, and there is no God except one God. And if they do not desist from what they are saying, there will surely afflict the disbelievers among them a painful punishment. So yes, I do believe that shirk is a sin. That it says many times that you should not associate partners with Allah. So there is a punishment for that, just like there's a punishment for me being adulterous after I take my shahada. There's a punishment for all types of sins. Now, I don't see where it specifically states that there's an eternity of punishment for said things other than like kafirs. Like we could say that Pharaoh, most likely in the story of Exodus, he knew that God existed and still denied him before he died. So that would be one of the few people. So in my belief, as I've come to know Islam, is that Allah truly is, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Like he is very merciful and very gracious. So those who have not been given that exact, the proper amount of truth to be able to convince them mercy will be shown upon them. And I also believe that even prior to this, when it comes to like the whole free will and us being thrown into this reality, there's that pre-eternal existence to where we accept this test. So if I accept this test and I'm thrown in pardon my French, but a shitstorm, I mean, I chose to enter this and I chose to take this challenge in this test. So I kind of come from maybe something very different than what you grew up with. I'm saying that we would have to try and figure out if my version of what I believe could not align whatsoever with the Quran.
In all honesty, I think you put a little bit of a Christian spin on on the Islamic doctrines, and in all honesty, I mean, it's a good thought that you have, and I would argue with all due respect that you are simply much more merciful and loving than Allah is in the narrative of Islam in the Quran. Because, as I said, Muslims vastly believe, if you go out there and say, hey, I don't believe that people who don't believe in Islam will just go to hell because they don't believe, the vast majority of Muslims will argue that this is wrong. This is a false position. It's very clear that those who disbelieve will go to hell. That's what the Quran says. If you did want to argue that only those who clearly, knowingly reject Allah will go to hell, then you would have to back that up with the Quran, with scriptural evidence, for example. What the Quran says is it describes those who disbelieve as the kafir, the kuffar. It calls those who disbelieve among the people of the scripture, the polytheists and others, kuffar, because they have rejected Allah and denied his signs. And those will be punished in hell forever. The Quran does not, on the other hand, somewhere else or anywhere else say that Allah will forgive those who do not know and die not knowing. And it does not say that Allah will, forgive those who just do not know. This is not something that the Quran teaches. It clearly, on the other hand, says, for example, in chapter 98, verse 6, which is a very good Quran verse. It says, those who disbelieved among the people of the scripture and the polytheists will be in the fire of hell, abiding therein eternally. Those are the worst of creatures. And the issue here is, you brought up that shirk is a sin that is punishable. But what is shirk? Shirk is a belief. It means that you believe something that differs from the Islamic belief about the nature of God, or about whether there is a God, what God is. So you are, in the end, believing in something, not merely committing a sin, knowing that it is a sin. And for that, according to the Quran, you will be eternally punished, simply because you don't believe in Islam.
So I'm trying to look up some, because like I said, 5 months in, and I've read the Quran one time. I'm going through the surahs very over and over again. And I will state that I could be wrong at any point in time. But from what I have read, I have seen verses to where it has talked about this, about showing mercy upon those who have not been convinced. I've also seen hadith about that talks about some of the things that the Prophet ﷺ said about Allah's mercy, and said about those who have not received the truth. It keeps referring back to receiving the truth. And from my mind, the way that I articulate that is, if I'm right here trying to give you the cosmological arguments, and I get you to a general God, and I don't do good enough to get you to take your shahada and come back to Islam, then I have not given you the truth. So from those different hadith compilations, plus what I have read so far in what I've read of the Quran, I feel as if I could make an argument, and we could set this up in the future. I could make an argument that it is saying that that people who are not convinced, that just because they aren't convinced, that they will go to they will go to Jahannam for forever. I believe that since God is merciful, that He would show mercy upon those who did not. I mean, you can't choose what you're convinced of. So how is it their fault? I totally agree with you. How is it somebody's fault if they're not convinced of something to be punished for it? I don't believe that. I believe that is consistent, and I also believe that God, being the entirely merciful, would show mercy upon those who have not been shown what's called the truth in many different places.
I entirely understand that. The issue here is the issue here is you accept that the entire idea of Allah punishing people simply for not believing, simply for being unconvinced, is absurd. It doesn't make sense. I don't want to
I
speak
do,
for
yeah.
you, but as
No,
I
I
see
agree
it,
with that.
yeah, okay, you accept that as absurd, and I also accepted that as completely absurd, which led me to the conclusion that Islam is false, because, in all honesty, that is what Islam teaches. I understand that you want to find an alternate explanation because this explanation seems absurd, doesn't make sense. But the struggle to find a different explanation, to find a different interpretation of what Allah will do to the disbelievers, is simply not found within the scriptures, the fundamental teachings of Islam. There is no such Quran verse. I mean, you could interpret Allah's mercy as pointing at a hypothetical truth where Allah forgives those who have not believed. But the evidence points to the contrary. Even in the hadiths, there is a major hadith, since you brought it up, in which Muhammad actually says that Allah will put those into heaven who have a little piece of iman in their heart, while they have deserved hellfire for their deeds. But it then also says that Allah will take out the Christians and Jews and will put them into hell for their disbelief and punish them there, while he will put those Muslims with little faith into heaven, because this is what the Islamic view is. The Quran also teaches at the very beginning, and in Surah Baqarah, within the first minutes, that Allah has placed a seal upon the hearts of those who do not believe. They are deaf, dumb, and blind. So we do not understand, we don't see the truth, and we are people of the hellfire. Allah has created us for hell, basically. So what you are describing as absurd, with all due respect, is the Islamic belief, which is why Islam is false.
I understand that, and I understand that's been your perspective, and what you grew up with, what you were taught, and you were actually in Turkey, which is what a predominantly Islamic, I would say Islamic country.
I grew up in Germany, but
there's a lot more halal there than there is in Cincinnati. I'll tell you that much. But yeah. So what I'm getting at is that my experience talking to Muslims. My experience, even as a combat veteran, when I was in Afghanistan, I was there speaking with village elders. I was there, interacting with the local nationals. I was interacting with the Taliban, and I was able to talk to these people through my interpreter, and I was getting some of the same views that I'm speaking about right now, even from those who were like living in Afghanistan right now. And the Muslims that I talked to, the brothers over at the Tap Show, they're explaining things to me exactly how I'm explaining things to you. So I think this is a cultural difference. I think that this different belief is very, very cultural.
They actually said to me, Abdul, actually over there, when I was over there, confirmed it to me explicitly. I said, if I die in my current state rejecting Islam, will I go to hell? And he said, yes, but only if you die in your current state, because you don't believe in it. So that's what he confirmed. I don't want to misrepresent it, but you can go back and see that. So
I'll take a look at it. I'll definitely take a look at it. But I'm simply just saying, to become an atheist, like, did you go into some sense of like maybe deism, or like while you were on your way out, did you go into like a deist view? Like, I didn't hear that part of your summary.
Yeah, I kind of skipped that. I didn't throw the baby out immediately. I was stuck in some phase where I wasn't entirely sure if God exists or not. One day I just came to the conclusion. I realized, man, hell, it doesn't make sense. I can't justify it. So I told myself, okay, I'm not a Muslim. I don't believe in Allah anymore. And I was not sure whether God is real or not. So I was rather in an agnostic, slightly deistic phase. It took another year or so until I concluded that God doesn't exist.
Gotcha. Okay. So I would say I think we're running low on time, but I do have one last question. Now, when I was stating that I went through my process, and at the very end of the process, I used the process of elimination to look at all the worldviews that have been presented to me and do a dive on them and figure out if they are logically contradictory or not. In the same sense that I did that in reverse, did you do the same thing and went through all of the other belief systems, reading the Bible, reading, the Torah, reading the Bhagavad Gita, and all these other holy books to see if something may rekindle your belief or strengthen your belief in God?
Yeah, actually, just 2 years ago, I was very close to believing in God again, and I was thinking of joining a certain religion. I have been on the pursuit of truth ever since. I have never given up. I'm currently studying psychology and religious studies, which I'm kind of trying to focus on. I take from certain religious beliefs, so I'm still always there. I will never claim that I know the absolute truth and that something else. I will always leave the possibility open that something might be true while I completely accept it as false.
Mhm.
If that makes sense.
Boss
That
man's
was
here.
almost perfect timing to the 30 minutes. It's amazing how fast 30 minutes goes. I told Khalil that I hope this ends in a 3-parter where he goes on your channel and then you guys go on his and just keep this thing going. So I do have questions. It looked like initially majority of the questions were for Khalil. So what we'll do is if the questions for you, we'll throw it to you, and then the other participant can throw some.
I'll just leave.
Once again, thank you to the viewers. Please consider liking and subscribing. Please consider joining me in 45 minutes when Matt Dillahunty comes on to have a conversation about the resurrection as well, if you're interested. First question was one sent to me on Facebook. It says, "Hi Khalil, Christian J. Watkins here. What would you say to criticism of your faith that says your deconversion was hasty and unfounded, not necessarily false, especially given you believe without finishing the Quran? Is it fair for someone like me to be skeptical of your position?"
It's fair to be skeptical of the position. For one, I don't think that it was hasty. I think that this was a process that was like I said, 8 to 10 months of me really diving into just Islam itself. For most of that time, for the majority of that time, diving into the arguments that these Muslim philosophers were making. So I would say that also. I'm trying to remember the other parts of the question that he asked. So would it be reasonable for him to doubt it? Yes, because he wasn't really around me too often. I know Christian's a good guy. He's very knowledgeable and he's very empathetic to people's positions. So I know Christian doesn't mean any harm by this. But yeah, I would say that yeah, you can be skeptical and you can be doubtful about my conversion. But yeah, that's the other thing that he said. Without fully reading the Quran, can someone have a reasonable belief in abiogenesis or evolution without being an expert in the field? So I do think that even though I haven't fully finished the Quran, I can be convinced of the truth of Islam as long as I am open-minded and honest enough to say that I could be wrong.
I think I completely agree with that. I think you don't have to be 100% knowledgeable about something in order to accept that it is true. I mean, I think it would be reasonable to have a proper foundation as to why you believe a certain worldview is true, a certain religion is true. It doesn't require that you know every single thing about it, I would say.
All righty. The next question. It says, would Khalil publicly leave Islam if he was shown that Islam was false in contradiction to his reasons for joining?
Yep.
I think
Nice.
AP would condone that.
I love it. I think, very honest, Khalil, I think I really love this conversation. I love your attitude. This is the best conversation with a Muslim that I have ever had. So I appreciate it so much. I love your stance and your attitude. I would love to also invite you over to my channel sometime. But yeah, let's go.
All righty. Next question. Khalil, how do you respond when someone asks, how can God exist when he needs men to enforce his rules?
I would just reject the statement that he says men need to enforce his rules. I don't think that logically follows. I mean, I could give many different reasons why I don't think that men need to enforce his rules. I think that men do enforce his rules.
All right, the next question. And sorry, I'm having to look at the screen. I probably need glasses as I get older.
Fine.
How does Khalil feel about, sounds a little funny, that Islam is currently the only religion that prevents people from leaving it by threats of capital punishment? How is it the true religion if there is no choice?
I actually know that this is false from personal experience. When I left atheism, I received about 3 or 4 different death threats from other atheists saying that they were going to kill me. So it's not necessarily capital punishment, but I was being told that my life was going to be ended because I was no longer an atheist.
I would contest that if I may. The issue here, the difference is that atheism doesn't have any doctrines. Other religions don't have specific certain instructions, although the Old Testament does contain certain instructions on punishing those who incite others to leave their religion and worship other gods. They don't have the same issue. Islam has the problem of directly instructing in Muhammad's words to kill those who leave the religion, which is why so many Muslims in our time still believe in the same thing. And that makes it, of course, very problematic on a moral level.
Yeah, so a quick question, because AP, you're probably much more knowledgeable than me when it comes to this. Does every single country that did or does follow the Sharia follow that exact that capital punishment?
Not necessarily, no. Well, in our time, if you ask the most traditionalist Orthodox Muslim groups, they will argue that there is no proper country that truly follows the Sharia. According to them, in the true Sharia, that law would be applied. There are certain Islamic republics, Islamic states in our time that don't fully apply such a law, but they apply variants of it.
From what I've heard is that what most of the countries do in recent days is give you a specific time period. Let's just arbitrarily say 3 days to sit down with an imam or a sheikh of some sort and try to bring you back to the fold of Islam and say, hey, my bad, I made a mistake, and then you're good to go. And if you don't, they kind of like take you to the border and kind of like when you got to get rid of that dog, you just kind of like, all right, run away now. You just take him to the edge of the country and say, you're not allowed in here. Basically they throw him out.
Well, what is actually true is that in Islam there are these in Islamic history there are the 4 jurisprudential schools within Sunni Islam. Depending on those 4 jurisprudential schools, they have different rulings on how this apostasy penalty is applied. Some of them say that you should give 3 days for a person to return. Others say that you don't have to give that. But I think they all agree on one thing, which is that if somebody has been hostile toward Islam, then even if he repents, he will still be put to death. When you ask the traditionalists, they will not necessarily abide by these jurisprudential schools, but go to the original text and judge by it, directly executing a man who leaves Islam and publicly says it. So that is the traditional approach to it. In recent times, of course, things have changed a little bit.
Alrighty, and the next question says, Khalil, based on many reliable historical, screen froze. Can you guys read that? It's not popping anymore.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, based on many reliable historical attestations and archaeological evidence, virtually all scholars affirm Jesus was crucified. Do you realize this before converting to Islam? Yeah, when I actually argue against Christianity, I grant everything that you claim that the Bible says, that Jesus was God, that he was crucified. I do all of that stuff and then go into a philosophical nature of dismantling the logical problems within the key tenets of Christianity. So yeah, I just go ahead and grant all that for conversation's sake. I think the Quran is actually very, very vague when it comes to this. It just states that Jesus was not crucified, that he did not die on that day, and I think that's pretty much where they draw the line, and there's not much more information after that.
All right, I have one last question that came from Messenger. This is from a mutual friend, Daz Greenwood. If Muhammad was literal, how could he cross-check the message he received to the message written down?
If Muhammad was literal?
My dyslexia. Illiterate. This was just a lesson in dyslexia, ladies.
Okay, yeah. What was the question again? If he was illiterate?
Yes.
What's the rest of it?
How could he cross-check the message he received to the message written down?
I don't think he was the one that cross-checked it. I think that he had scribes write it down, and as he was writing it down, people were memorizing it, and the people who memorized it and wrote it down were able to cross-reference it between each other, the ones who were literate of writing.
I actually wanted to bring that up as a problem and ask you how you trust that process. I made a whole video about that thing. The idea is that the teaching is that Muhammad received revelations from the angel Gabriel, revelations which came from Allah directly to him. No other person can really verify these revelations and their nature and how they were delivered to him. He then recites these revelations to people around him. Those people around him memorize those revelations or make notes of them. And after Muhammad dies, many of these people who memorized it die. And then the Caliph says, hey, if more of these people die, we will lose the whole Quran. Let's just put this all together and make a book of it. And then they go around gathering all the different memories and notes and turn it into the whole Quran. But it's very hard to trust that entire process, to me, honestly.
I can understand that.
Alrighty, guys, if you want to plug what's going on next, your channels, future videos.
Oh, that's it? No questions for me? Man.
There was actually like 0 questions that I saw for AP. I was disappointed. I thought that maybe there would be. Going back through.
Yeah.
I got one. Could you be wrong?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. All right.
In all honesty, I think there's it's almost impossible to me that I'm wrong about Islam. I have to be very honest about that. But of course, there's always the possibility that I'm wrong about something that I'm even very much convinced about.
Sure. Could you be wrong about Christianity?
Could be. So far, I don't see enough reason to believe that.
Nah, James, you're sitting in a room with 2 atheists, with one person who used to be an atheist, and still has the same arguments against Christianity. But James is fun to talk to.
But really, I'm genuinely interested in having you on my channel as well, and in continuing to have these conversations, because I think this was very pleasant to me. I really enjoyed this, and I would love to keep continuing. And James, thank you so much for making this possible.
No, I appreciate it. There's one question just came in for you, and it's a very hot button question. So we'll throw it out, cause some controversy a little bit in the video with, if you don't mind.
To me? Huh.
Yep. AP, do you believe the Taliban are being good or bad Muslims?
That's a terrible terms to end this conversation, but well, depends on how you define good and bad Muslims. They follow, if you ask them, they follow the most pure understanding of Islam. According to their own understanding, they want to bring society back to how it was 1,400 years ago in Muhammad's time. So if you ask them, they are the purest form of Islam. I would say, as far as with everything that I have learned about Islam, they are very accurate in how they follow and apply Islam. Whereas there are certain things about which they, I think, are a little bit wrong, such as the inheritance and how it's divided between men and women, for example. There, they don't entirely agree with the Quranic commands. But overall, I think they are very close to real Islam.
They're basically the Westboro Baptist Church on steroids for Islam, is what you're saying, right?
I would say they are less extreme, but yeah.
I would just denounce them and say that they're not Muslims, because the way that I understand Islam, that's not it at all. Now, I may have a real cookie cutter Care Bear version of Islam, but I mean, that's what I believe.
All right.
I do apologize, as I'm starting to see a bunch of questions for AP now. I promised the guys like 8:30 would be a very hard cutoff.
They're probably just asking now because I said no one is asking me questions.
So, guys, ask it in the comment section after, and AP, maybe if you're available later on this evening, you can go back and pop in some there if you're able.
Yep, I have to join another live stream somewhere else in half an hour, so it's just a very tight date.
Yeah, and then in a half an hour, I have Matt Dillahunty and my friend Caleb, who wrote a book on the resurrection, talking about it as well.
Thanks for having me on, James. Thanks for speaking with me, AP. It was a good conversation. I hope that our future conversations, I can still be your favorite Muslim. I really hope so.
I believe so.
I can't guarantee that, but I really do hope so.
I think your chances are very high. There's not much competition, to be very honest. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Khalil. Thank you, James.
All right.